Hello everyone, welcome to the Artist Talk with Hval and Håvard Volden. Yes. I'm Timo Posselt. I'm a freelance journalist for several newspapers and magazines in Switzerland. I write mostly about pop culture, film and literature. And I'm here today with Hval, who's 41 and one of the most interesting musicians between avant-garde and pop music today. She's made 10 albums, beyond others, under the moniker of Rocket to the Sky, and has written 3 books, of which 2 have been translated to English. She grew up in Norway and lived in Australia and New York City, and is currently based in the suburb of Oslo. Håvard Volden was born in 1980 in Trondheim, in the north of Norway. He studied jazz guitar at Berklee College of Music in the US. Håvard plays in different bands, such as the noise rock jazz band Moon Relay or the electro acoustic trio Modersen. Håvard founded, together with Hval, the independent music label Metal Records, and this year they published their debut album as Lost Girls, called Menneskekollektivet. They live together with a dog called Cleo in a suburban house in Oslo. Please welcome with me with a warm round of applause. The other day I was listening to your new album, Menneskekollektivet, and I was stunned. This didn't feel like an album which was made during a global pandemic. It was much more like a music made for clubs. How did you manage to do such an album when all clubs were closed?
This was before all the clubs were closed. We recorded the album in March 2020.
Yeah, we recorded the album the week before lockdown. So, and all the music was stuff we played when, back when you could play music normally. So we kind of moved in this direction for a while, where we wanted to see what people like us could do with a club space, I guess. But then we recorded, and like we went from we were only we were in a studio for 4 days, and at the beginning it was normal but weird, and there were not that many people in the coffee shop. And like on the 4th day, the producer, sound engineer's partner had been in a meeting with someone with COVID, and like the town was shut down, everyone was buying toilet paper, and it was just over. So that's why also the album has 5 songs, because we just had to leave.
You had to end the recording.
Yeah, we had to run back to our house.
That's a pity. But
it's a good idea.
Yeah, we ended like on a high.
I've also read that it was the first album you did in a studio. The last ones you did in your own apartment in Oslo. How did that change the process of recording the album?
Well, it gives you much more freedom to play. You don't have to do everything with recording. So you can leave all the sound and stuff. We have a co-producer called Ihrer. He will join us tomorrow, actually, playing drums and stuff. But it gives us much more freedom to just think about what we actually know best to play.
Yeah, I think what we've done together in the past, we've done at home, or you've recorded stuff in yours recording space, and I recorded stuff in my space, and it's been sort of moved around a lot. But with being in a studio, we could pretend to play live, so we could play together. So this is recorded with vocals and guitar, and most of the tracks going at once with like some overdubs. And that creates a very different atmosphere. Things can really grow, and like you can respond on the spot. And that, I think, really goes with the material, because we had been working on it in live settings for about 2 years before we got to record. So that was really fun. So it was actually kind of more spontaneous to be in the studio because we chose to just set up like a live station and perform live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult to do in your home.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't go with the bedroom thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And the first track on the album, Kollaborateur, is also the title track. And in the track, you recall a conversation you had with Jehovah's Witnesses, Zeugen Jehovah's in German. Can you tell us how this situation came about?
I guess that was me.
Yeah, I also.
We were at home. Well, they used to, or they probably still do. We used to live in Grønland, which is very central in Oslo, and it's a very eclectic part of the city, very vibrant, lots of immigrants. So there's this, like on the subway station, there's this permanent Jehovah pop-ups place. That sounds cool, doesn't it? It's just a bunch of people standing there with the watchtower. And it's so weird because it's in this kind of Muslim area. Sort of strange to have them in this place, but they also walk around. And came to the door, and I thought, okay, I'll let you in and see if anyone else wants to talk to you. So they were very interested, and I just spoke with them for a while. I'm not the kind of person who usually would do that, but I guess I had a conversation with them. It was interesting because we talked about music, and they were trying to sort of compare themselves to everything I said, like as we were very similar, but they were talking about stuff that was quite different, obviously. But it was interesting. I mean, they were a couple performing together, just like us, I guess, preaching something.
Do they do music?
Yeah, they used to play "You Raise Me Up" at home. That's harsh to say, but that's what they told me. Yes,
but
they
it's
do
also
play music, right?
It was then the inspiration for the song, because I was wondering, because the title of the song is called Kollaborateur, which is human collective in English, and it was something they said, or was it something you?
I'm not so sure if they inspired anything more than appearing as something that is also a collective, a mysterious collective to me, because I don't understand the motivation. I've never been very, I've never really understood organized religion, but I've grown up in a part of Norway that's quite religious, and so I guess I have this attraction to sort of trying to understand, especially the connection between music and religion and devotional performance. So I guess I sort of brought them in because I just spoke with them when we were in the studio, and I improvised a lot of the lyrics and also sort of wrote on the spot, mainly because I just didn't know what to do with lyrics, so I had been lazy. So I guess the Kollaborateur came in as like trying to bring different situations together of like devoting something in music or in voice to like a communal setting or a higher purpose or whatever. Yeah, but I probably wouldn't give them the credit of inspiring much, but you know, like it was interesting. Nobody opened the door for them, but I was the only one speaking with them. But they were interesting to talk to. Highly recommend.
You already mentioned you grew up in the so-called Norwegian Bible Belt, and I've also read that you had to read a lot of Bible when you were younger. Do you see any connection between religion and pop music as an artist?
Well, sometimes I listen to when I sort of do my nerdy research on more mainstream pop music, I see like a huge connection. There's obviously the connection of like form, like something that really works, something that preaches, and like something that is persuasive, something that's hard hitting, and like a sort of narrative that's catchy and telling very, like some kind of story that anyone could recognize in their lives, and that also has things like a drop and like these climbs, like trying to go higher. I guess I'm also interested in that with my music when I write more sort of pop songs. I am interested in like the elevated chorus and things like that, which I sometimes think might be sort of wanting to be religious experiences or wanting to give like an elevated form of experience. But with our music, I think that we're more of a slow building religion. So I guess, yeah, that's more of a meandering dual response.
Meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the tracks are very long on Menneske Kollektive, about 7 to 10 minutes even. And they're like meditations in a way. But was it something which came more from the improvisational kind of approach, or something you intended to do?
We wanted to try to dive into the more clubby music. We've actually never done that much before, I think. But the label we're on, Small Town Super Sound, there's a lot of more clubby music there. So we wanted to actually, try to do that also. And we both been interested in more like long form music, more experimental, droney stuff, and I think there's a lot of the same parameters, but we wanted to try to do it with beats and slow synths, and so it's and we've both been listening a lot to like Alice Coltrane, this
Robert Ashley.
Yeah, this nice synthesizers and yeah.
And you don't miss any choruses, because this is something which gets lost usually when you make this kind of meditative tracks.
Well, I think there are choruses on every track.
Yeah, we have chord changes, and this was actually something we talked about. We wanted to do club music, but with chords and harmonies. So.
Yeah, and things that changed and not just built. I mean, not that club music always does this, because that's also like really making club music into like its most boring description. But we wanted to do things like use elements, like repetitive elements, but also have guitar stuff that could continuously change, and have melodies, maybe even a chorus, but not exactly set. Like not really know exactly when that happened. But for me, any piece of music could have like a sort of chorus, climax. Climax is very stupid, because that sounds like there's like a millisecond. But yeah, I mean, when you have a more long form way of working, you don't have to be very precise and economical. You can let sort of the listener decide where is the chorus, what is the verse, what is the structure. It can be more open.
We talked about this earlier, that you've been collaborating since 10 years, almost 10 years now. I think it started off with New Don't Stand, 2012. And ever since, your music has become less acoustic in a way and more electronic. When did you eventually get away from the acoustic guitar?
Acoustic guitar always sound terrible when you like it. So, yeah, we both know the duo you don't sound we played. When you mic an acoustic guitar, it can sound okay out for the audience, but for me on stage with the monitor, it always sounds really terrible. So it's not fun to play.
It's like you lose. It's a
one of the
bit like
reasons for me.
Yeah, it's a little bit like with vocals. Unless you're very lucky and you're in a really good room, you lose a lot of the overtones. So it's like what is filling like a big space with many different sounds that come together just ends up being and that's a bit what we experienced with playing lots of concerts with 2 acoustic guitars. And I think it's I haven't played guitar since, so I haven't played guitar since 2013, I think. I just gave up. Because I just felt awful playing all these shows and just losing touch with what the music was. And you also have this experience when you're singing and playing guitar, you lose like there's no continuity, so your voice is not in the same room as the guitar. I mean, this sounds very detailed. But when you play more improvised music, to me at least, which I was sort of trying to do with you in Nordland, it just felt very distanced to perform live, feeling like we were in 3 different rooms and they were all so I think we just wanted to explore the room more, and we started to bring like tapes, and we used iPhones and used like things in different parts of the room. So we had this long period where we did things that maybe weren't New No Sad, maybe weren't Lost Girls either, but were more like little installations leading to the use of space that we probably do more with like beats and moving like guitar around and vocals around in what we do now.
Did you want to add something, Håvard?
No, I forgot.
Because it also makes sense thinking of the new album or the latest album, because the vocals in a way are at the same level than the guitar. It's not like there is not this hierarchy which is usually there in pop music, and you had intended to do that.
Yeah, this was also something the producer who also mixed the album. He wanted to have them more equal.
Yeah, we played with ideas of having them in different channels, and I mean it's natural when we perform live, and in that setting, being like in a live setting like we were in the studio, because in the studio there's a big room, so you can just perform as you would in a concert, and that made complete sense to sort of play off each other, especially between guitar and vocals, but also playing with these synth elements and beat elements. It just felt quite natural to have them equal.
Håvard, you're a multi-instrumentalist today, but you once studied jazz guitar, as I've mentioned. Jazz schools can be a very competitive environment. How did you get rid of this competitive vibe?
Yeah, that's I never been like a school person, to be honest, but I for some reason I ended up in the USA, in Boston, to study jazz. And this is a huge school. I think there was like 1,400 guitar players. So my reaction was that, okay, I cannot do this. So I started to doing everything else than playing normal guitar. So I explored the guitar in different other ways, like almost that people couldn't hear what I was doing, like stroking the body of on the guitar with the bow, stuff like that. And exploring more classical composition and all other stuff, you know, things like that. That's much more interesting for me. And in Boston, there's a lot of extremely good teachers because you have so many great schools, Harvard, MIT, and they go around and teach. So for me, I didn't in the end go there to play much guitar, but still was really. And there was so many great people from everywhere, so I met good friends. But after when I finished Berkeley, I guess. It's funny because I'm sure many people think this, but I studied music and guitar, and I had, a degree in guitar playing, but I don't think I can play the song on the guitar. Like, if someone asked me, like, especially this is my biggest nightmare, I think, like a family setting or something. If you can sit, play guitar for us, I would like run. I wouldn't know what to play, It's quite, I think it's, I was thinking about it this other day, it's kind of interesting that I studied so much music, but I couldn't know how to play a song.
Yeah, so you're a very bad bonfire guitarist.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it works.
I'm a very good, I didn't study music, but I'm also very good at not knowing how to do anything if I'm asked. So my sort of, I think that I've almost had like a fetish for karaoke because I find it so frightening. And even more so with the bonfire. I mean, what do people do? I mean, it's frightening because first of all you're playing a wooden instrument in front of fire.
Yeah, that's true.
And that already then, no. But yeah.
I mean, I could learn a song, but it's probably my interest that makes it. I don't want to.
But I remember when we started playing together, and this was before Nude on Sand. This was like 2008, and I couldn't understand. I think that it was just it didn't compute for me that you could play normal guitar. So I gave you this horrible role with my music, my solo project, and had you play like finger picking, and I was like, what's he doing? You have a degree. Yeah.
So,
But I understood, like, years later, I understood why.
Yeah.
Jenny, you went to Australia for college, and one could say you went from the edge of Europe to the edge of the world. How did your view of European culture change when you were in Australia?
I think it changed a lot. I think when I went there, I was sort of half skeptical, half disappointed, because I think that I was very young and ambitious and wanted to go to a sort of high-class British university or an American school, and then I ended up in this strange place, which was very good for me, I think, because it's a place that doesn't make sense. The history of Australia is crazy. The history of Australia is also the Western history. Like it's not true. It's not correct. It's bloody. It's awful, and that really changes. I guess it would change anyone's view on Western culture. So that was a really nice confrontation. I studied something that I don't think exists hardly anywhere. It's called creative arts. And it was like a pick and choose between art disciplines, half academic, half practical, which was for me like the perfect degree. But it was like a lot of really wonderful teachers, very much in touch with the otherness that I think is like completely mind-blowing in Australia, which is this awareness of being at the edge of the world, this awareness of being on stolen land, engagement in native history, like very alternative storytelling, and like other literatures, other theatres, non-Western theatre. So I got to study all this stuff, and that was yeah, that was a degree that didn't exist for very long, so it was too expensive and not productive, I guess, for the commercial interests of a university, but for me it was amazing.
And that's why you started off as a performance artist also.
Well, I never really did performance art, but I think that I started off there playing. I was doing my art studies by day. I never really got to perform because I always did sound, so I was always placed in the background doing sound design. But my performance was pop music. I played in bands, and I felt very inferior because I felt like, oh, okay, there's performance art, so it was like the highest of art forms, and then there was literature and like theatre and real art disciplines and like classical contemporary music or whatever, and then pop music was like guilty pleasure, but yet that's kind of what I craved to do as well. So it was a conflicting performance, which I think is also, you know, like what my work is coming from.
So, but you also already started with the project Rocket to the Sky in Australia, or it was when you came back?
No, that was before actually. I started that project, I was in a metal band in the 90s when I was in high school, and then one day I borrowed this hard disk recorder, which is what we used in the late 90s to record music, and then we put it onto our computers as really bad files. So I borrowed this thingy, this multi-track recorder, in like, I think it was 1999 sometime, and just started recording, and that was sort of the first time I recorded anything properly that was solo work. But I didn't do much with it until a few years later. And then when I came back from studying in Australia, I started sort of sending it to people and doing more with it.
You both speak Norwegian, which is your mother tongue, but all of your lyrics are in English.
That's actually not true.
Or like most of your lyrics, right?
So
What's in
We'll have some Norwegian tomorrow, actually. So maybe just you will understand if you're there.
I'll do
They're very bad.
But anyway, I was wondering about the relation of the two languages. How do you, like, from an artistic point of view, how do these two languages for you relate?
Well, I guess that's me. Right?
Yeah, I don't mind really so.
For me, I've grown up with music being in English, mostly, with a few exceptions, and spoken being Norwegian. I've grown up with poetry, or a more sort of liberated language being English, and something that's more biblical, set, norm, core being Norwegian. That's kind of hard to twist. And this is not the truth, you know, like it's just something that reflects the time that I grew up and how I discovered music, what I listened to, what my parents listened to, what was around. But I've always found it very difficult to sing in my own language. I've also haven't had the greatest, like I haven't really tried. So I probably use the language weirdly if I try. So English seems much more natural to me. But it was mainly because I was studying writing and developing writing in English when I was in school in Australia. So it kind of comes from there as well. But I have a very weird relationship with Norwegian vowels.
How come? Or would you?
I'm not sure how to use them in a singing voice. The one time I sort of felt like, I'm getting somewhere, I think that I felt like the Norwegian started to seem like it was almost like Indian folk music. There's something, every language has its very specific consonants and vowels and use of sounds.
You do sound different when you sing Norwegian.
I sound different when I speak too, so...
Yeah, you have like different melodies, more or less, you know, because...
I think I have two mouths.
Yeah.
One's more fluid and the other one's...
When I first heard you sing in Norwegian, I thought it was really strange.
Yeah.
Something that didn't...
Did it sound like I was in primary school?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Because that's how I feel.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, you've been collaborating for almost 10 years, but and you're also partners. But in your music, there seems to be very little obvious reference to your private lives. Why is that?
I mean, for you, maybe there's a lot of references in Håvard's music because it's not words. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, you always get to, when you do instrumental things, you always get to sort of sneak away from this. I think there are a lot of references, but they may be more sonic than lyrical. I find it quite interesting that I've sometimes been described as doing very like provocative private stuff when I've actually almost never written very sort of autobiographical lyrics. It may come from the fact that I've not been so interested in that format, and I find it more interesting to go into language in a more abstract way. I also think that I've always had this kind of point of view in my writing of lyrics that's quite separate, like that's like a person removed a bit from social settings and private settings. It's a traveler, like someone who's not really going into the parents and the partner and the house. So maybe that goes with my intense need that I had to get away when I was younger. I don't know. Maybe it's my literary interests that are more poetic, I guess. Yeah. I'm not sure if I have a good answer, but I've not ever been very interested in bringing this in. It's easier in this kind of setting, like when we were discussing fermentation and bringing up a dog previously. I do think, though, that this might change in the future. Because, you know, with COVID, what else is there?
I mean, fiction is still there.
Yes, but you can work. I think that it's interesting now that we've been private people for a while, and sort of many of us have been forced to it, and many have been forced to being frontline workers, which is a completely different thing. But it's been a bit either or. And so you've and lots of artists and paper pushers of different computer pushers have been sort of forced into this private person existence. I find it really interesting, and there may be that may be reflected in like future work, maybe also in future Lost Girls work. Who knows? So it hasn't happened yet.
So I mean, there could be more authenticity or more like personal stuff in your future projects.
Well, if the authentic is autobiographical detail, then maybe. I've always struggled a bit with this because, I mean, there are many different things that are called authentic. Sometimes the authentic is like the male deep voice. Sometimes the authentic is wearing a woolen jumper when you perform instead of wearing a dress or high heels, because then you're dressed up and trying to be something. The authentic can be traditional food, or it's something traditional because the traditional is authentic rather than, you know, the what isn't mainstream. So I think it's a very difficult concept. And I didn't mean to say that you think it's completely supernatural, like very natural to you. But I think that I question it a lot, and in questioning it, I need to move away from writing about this sort of more enclosed private life. But maybe not in the future.
Well, listening to your music and following your project, one could also get the impression that you're trying to disappear behind your art. That it's more like a persona you're performing.
Should I talk again?
Yeah.
I mean, that's very relevant. I think that already when I was studying theatre, I was incredibly interested in a stage presence as disappearing act, being a general figure on stage rather than representing this particular person or this particular character or a dramatic character. That's how I feel about singing too. It's a disappearing act, like in the sense that you are, when you use your voice, you engage with the air, and it sounds very esoteric, but you engage with sort of going out of yourself, and I'm very interested in that. So yeah, all this is linked. But this might be something you can talk about as well. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to be words.
Do you disappear behind a wall of sound, or playing your guitar? It makes you feel different than just standing on the stage. I don't know.
Yeah, I can totally disappear in sound for hours.
But you have been interested in like using the tape machine to sort of play with the idea of
Yeah, I've been using this old reel-to-reel tape machine and playing guitar through it, and then what you hear is the guitar, but just a few seconds later. So if I play, because you have you record the sound in the. You can make like a tape loop out of this. So when I play a sound, the sound will you will hear the sound like a second later, and you can actually stop time with this more or less, because you can play the sound, and then the sound is inside the loop, but then you can stop the loop, and then kind of stop the time, and then you can drag it back and forth, and then it's kind of being gone.
That sounds cool. I'd love to hear it though.
Yeah, we used to do it with Lost Girls, early Lost Girls.
But it's hard to travel with. These machines are very fragile.
Yeah, they're big and heavy.
And the airlines are not very accepting of bringing them. They're too big.
Yeah.
But we've been using voice, also recording and manipulating the voice through this kind of system.
Cool. You already mentioned, Jenny, that in your songs you refer to sex in a way which is often considered explicit. I was wondering if that does come natural to you, or if you are intending to provoke.
Oh, I think it comes natural. I never really. I remember the first time I wrote something that others were shocked by, and I think that. Sorry, guys, I'm not COVID. I've had a cold for 4 weeks. It's very annoying. But I remember in high school I wrote this speech. In Norway, there's this tradition of. For the final year of high school, there's a ball, and this is part of this traditional literacy fighting we have. Not to go into that, but there is a speech called like the lady's speech by a male person, and then a female person like has So I wrote one of these in character, and I thought it was really funny and fun to write, and then everyone was shocked when they read it. And I think that's just, like, it's probably a bit how my brain works. I'm a very shy and silent type, or I'm not silent, obviously I'm talking crazy. But I wouldn't do that if I were here with the microphone. If I were mingling with you guys, I would be in the corner. And you would be as well. You would be in the corner, actually. So I think I'm kind of like a quiet person that thinks in a corner, and then suddenly I have an idea, and I think it's just something that's fun and natural, but then everyone goes, and I've had a lot of fun with that, because to me it's about like the liberating potential in writing your voice. And sometimes I write and I feel like something's happening and I don't know what it is, but I have to pursue it, and it's nothing that's going anywhere sexual or like to do with exploring gender or whatever. But sometimes it goes there, and I guess that's where this question comes from. I don't think I've ever tried to be provocative when I've had these thoughts or these explorations, but I do think I'm probably quite like willing to go to where the writing goes. Although I'm probably not willing to go into the very autobiographical detail about it. I'm more interested in what is a person than who am I, and how does that relate to my love life.
Something which also seems to be connected to this kind of ideas is that you think about the question of who's looking at whom. What does interest you about this?
Well, I think I did get interested in from reading and studying feminist film critique, lots of different gender studies, and generally reading literature from different perspectives than the Western canon when I was studying. So a lot of this for me comes from there, and then just sort of evolved. Yeah, I'm extremely interested in what a gaze is, what ownership is, whether it's a way to change that, change power relations. But also, I mean, I'm also quite interested in the fact that I am an artist in a power hierarchy working with the industry. So I have only myself to attack, sort of thing. I can't speak from everyone or for everyone. So I sort of sometimes think that I can build up and destroy a self through myself, which is a little bit like the disappearing act. Of course, it's not. It's also like dangerous territory, but yeah, it's the only perspective I have, and I'm always critical of gazes and perspectives, but I also like to play with them.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think of your novel Girls Against God, where the narrator says maybe the only way an artist can escape capitalism and patriarchy today is to use art to disappear as an individual. So in a way it's interesting because you're talking about, or you're thinking about the gaze in your music, but in a way you're also trying to disappear, or it's a way to disappear.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gaze has been used to make others disappear to great advantage in most power hierarchy situations. The gaze is used to, like blame and place guilt upon someone else, place ownership to you. If the gaze comes from you, you own. There are rights embedded in the gaze. Very problematic. All of the aspects of the gaze are very problematic. I remember a film that I've seen a million times, and we've not been very sort of referential in this conversation, which is good because I forgot everything when I got a dog. So now my brain is mushy. But I remember watching Sans Soleil by Chris Marker when I was about 20. I watched it probably 100 times. And there are lots of segments in this sort of essay film. It's an essay film, and there is a segment that is about trying to catch someone's gaze, like trying to get a character to, or trying to get a person to look back at the camera. And it's getting more and more uncomfortable, at least it did for me. So I've always been very interested in what a gaze is, and especially in the context of the Western gaze, the male gaze, like the gaze that comes with ownership.
Another subject which is very, which is like in almost all your work is the body, or the female body, to be more specific. I was wondering, did your artistic relationship to your body change over the years?
Yeah, I think so. I think hopefully everyone's relationship to what a body is can change. I know that like times have really changed since I started my sort of adult life thinking, or like discovering and thinking about the body in a political context. I think it's really important that it changes, and that that the female body means something else now than it could to me 20 years ago, and it's much even more problematic. I mean, I feel uncomfortable saying the female body because it's like, what is it? Who does this concept exclude? But I also think that through my work and through writing about bodies, and I do write about the body more in a political context than the actual my own body context. It would be interesting to return to it maybe when I'm even older than I already am. As you mentioned, I'm 41, whereas Hval is born in 1980. So that's two very different things. But yeah, it's interesting to sort of return to the idea of the body at different ages, at different political times. I mean, it's completely changing.
You once said that even if desires are complex, they rest childlike. I was wondering, what were your desires as a child?
Flying, obviously.
Yeah.
Who didn't dream of flying? What about you?
Have you always wanted to be a musician? Or?
Yeah, I guess I grew up in a family. My dad was a musician, so yeah, it's kind of. I don't know if it was a desire, but it just happened.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to run a video rental store and work with horses. That was slightly later. 3 different steps. Flying, and then, I mean flying as in like, when you dream that you're flying, like a bird, not like as a pilot.
My dad wanted me to be a baker, so I could make him cakes and stuff.
That's trying Christmas Eve.
Okay. In a way, you're neither a pop star nor like an avant-garde artist. You're kind of in between. Is there an advantage of this position?
I think so, if you're referring to me. I'm definitely not a pop star. I mean, I only get like 1,300 likes most liked posts, which is also because I'm terrible at Instagram. But I think that being in between is it's very different from being completely unknown. When you are completely unknown or very sort of grassroots, you're less conflicted in a way. So that being in my position, I feel like I'm in between. But I'm still in the dirty place. Still in the place where I'm influenced by working with industry, acknowledging structures, traveling to Switzerland instead of working for my local culture. Things are always, your choices are always debatable. I once did, I think this is like 11, 12 years ago now, but I once agreed to have my music in an ad for the first time. And I was very sort of, oh, what is this? Somebody wants to use my music. I was very sort of naive about it. But then it turned out it was the Daily Mail, which is a horrible British newspaper. It was actually like really, it was a shithole of an ad that I put my music in willingly. And I think that I really realized then that, wow, I am in the middle, because I can do things like this, and it's really awful. And I didn't even, I didn't know that it was awful, because nobody told me it was awful. But I can't say that someone else made the decision, and I had a decision to make. So if you probably find it online, this horrible ad, when the Daily Mail decided to make a women's section called Female, and they had an ad for it, and that's my old song.
And that was just before we actually released our Middle Sound album.
Yes.
And we had a review in the Wire magazine, and the only thing she wrote about was...
Yeah. She wrote about that ad, and I think that was deserved.
Yeah.
The review in Wire was by Nina Power, who's a very prominent feminist thinker, and she was absolutely right, except it had nothing to do with the music. But it's still, it was a very interesting experience. It was unfortunate for you to be near such a horrible nexus of evil.
It's difficult though, when you were offered money also, which is sometimes hard to, say no to. Sure.
It was the first money I was ever offered for using the music. And everyone was saying, really good, yeah, do it. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. But the thing is, I felt like I said, I don't know. And then that's not what you say. You make a decision, even though you feel like you're not doing it. And this is also what happens if you agree to play in Israel, or there are so many things that are difficult, but you are still making decisions when you choose to appear on stage, when your music is used, even if you're still in this compromised position, like the in-between, where you don't get paid enough to really get by, and you're still not, you're still told that you're establishing a career. You're not really, you're not safe. You're not there yet. You can't be comfortable. And I think that's also the in-between is sort of manifestation of this, our time really relying upon precarious workforces, because the in-between is still as precarious as what's beneath it, industry in an industry sense. But yeah, which is why I also when you brought up the disappearing in art, I'm also very sort of fascinated by the opposite, which is quitting, quitting art completely, because that would be the only logical decision to do, politically. This industry is ludicrous. There's so many stupid things happening, but obviously then you're on stage and performing, and it's wonderful. And I wouldn't want to be, especially as a listener, I wouldn't want to be without music.
No, please don't quit. You also once said that your audience became wider in a way. and it allowed you to be more weird?
When? You told me you wouldn't ask me about things I've said before.
But do you still think that? Because I mean, your audience has become bigger, I'd say, over the years, and you've become more famous.
I think that I've had different periods. So when I started out my solo work, I was in a completely Norwegian context, and I felt like people thought I was crazy. I was a crazy lady. I was just too young to be a cat lady. And I felt like there was very little respect, and I was thinking, oh, what about all these references in my work? Why is that reduced to being crazy and quirky? Like all these like words on, you know, the gaze tells someone that they're something that's belittling, you know? That's what it felt like. But then as I started performing internationally and got out of Norway, I felt like there was reception there that was more open and, you know, more diverse, because in different places people will have different backgrounds. And also when you hear someone speak in a strange Australian, British, American accent, it's weirder if they're Swiss than if they're Norwegian. And to a Norwegian, it's really weird if they're Norwegian. So I think that, like, being able to meet people who are, and reach people who are not Norwegian was very important for me, because I never really felt like I could communicate freely within Norway. Probably just because of my own insecurity, but I did feel like that allowed me to maybe be more weird, but mostly be more free. I think now maybe I'm less weird, or I don't care so much if it's weird or not. So I think I'm a little more relaxed. You know, I'm 41 and I was born in 1980.
I didn't know your birthday, so that's why I mentioned 1980.
Oh,
I'm sorry. But anyway, I would like to open up now, and other questions from the audience. Don't be shy. Just ask whatever you want.
Don't be shy, although I would never have asked you.
Who would be curious about the metal past?
Well, if you go on YouTube, there's a band called Shelley's Raven. If any of you have seen the 90s cult classic The Crow, that band was named after the Crow in The Crow. But because of the artist Sheryl Crow, we couldn't call ourselves, or the band, they had the name before I joined the band, but they couldn't call themselves Shelley's Crow. Obviously that doesn't work when there's a mainstream artist called Sheryl Crow, so it was Raven instead. That was a really interesting start. This was in the era of meeting people online and IRC and whatnot, and the sort of fanzine subculture era. And yeah, I met people online and joined the band near where I lived, and it was like a goth metal band, and you can find some YouTube clips. There is a track in Norwegian that I quite like, Dagen Viker Overort. I played it to you. You're not as you're a bit calm about. I mean, I expected more of a reaction. Yeah. So you can look for Shelley's Raven with a Z. It was a nice place to start. It's a very sweet, or it was a sweet place to sort of explore other types of music than more mainstream music, or like the stuff that you are exposed to naturally at that age.
Are you still following the scene, the black or the metal scene?
No, I was too young for the black metal scene, and I found it quite scary. I guess influenced by our generation probably was influenced by the media. But I think I met people from quite a wide variety of the metal community through this band, and I realized that it's diverse. Some people are really just interested in the expression of that music, and other people are maybe the more sort of drawn to the darkness, the psychological part of it. You know, teenagers will be drawn to drama, emo stuff. Yeah, but it was a really eye-opening scene to sort of see. I wouldn't say that I was in it because I was living in such a small town, so the scene was literally like 10 people that you would meet. Yeah, but I highly recommend. Join a metal band in high school.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, I was thinking about you said acknowledging structures, and this brought me to the thought, like, was it hard for you to get in when you started to work with the industry? Like, did you feel like hard structures that you would have to kind of break or play with and change them so that it fits to you, or were you just going with the flow? Like, I don't know if you understand, but for example, I'm now first time in touch with this industry thinking, releasing my first music, and I'm new to this whole world, and I feel like there are many things that I don't quite, I don't know if I agree, like, and I was wondering if you had those struggles.
Yeah, I've had lots of struggles. I think that because I played in bands for many years before I understood that there was much of a structure. I just worked with musicians and friends and didn't really understand what happened outside of what musicians did themselves. So I was very afraid for many years of anyone who was in the industry as in like anyone who was a booking agent or a manager, and this I think also was for me, it was extra difficult because when I started performing as a solo artist, I was in Norway, and and Norway had a very small industry at that point and not very much outside of the mainstream, so that, you know, and it might be the same here, that there's not this, like there is in America, in the UK, maybe other like bigger countries, there's more of a support network for a variety of different types of music. Whereas in my country, it was like, I remember having this meeting with a manager many years ago, and he said, so which radio station should we aim you for? Or which, like, you have to make a choice. Is it this one or this one? It was literally two options, and one was like adult contemporary, and the other one was the teen pop station. And that's incredibly difficult then to, when you have these experiences, and you know, for this guy, who was a manager for maybe more mainstream artists, maybe that's the reality, because you're in such a small music economy that to make any kind of living, you have to be very popular. So that might be real, but when you work with the type of music that I guess most musicians work with, which is not the very mainstream of mainstream, then to actually get support and feel supported, which is what a support network is for, you have to think differently, and you have to work with people that think differently. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very hard. And so, I was afraid of industry people for a very long time. I mean, now I work with people, I have a manager, I have booking agents, and I love them all. They're great people, and they are really supportive. I mean, we're still all evil. I mean, in an industry that has like And it's the same, I guess, if you're a promoter, like you really love what you do, but at the same time you know that you'll have to push people so that they post on Instagram, because that's, you know, like you have to push this and this channel and do this or this work that is quite streamlined. And it's like, it can be really crushing.
I don't think you've never been like chasing that.
No.
But I think it's like slowly just doing stuff, and I think your fame came quite late, like in the mid-30s.
Yeah.
So I mean, we did all the booking, you know, ourselves, and we've just been working slowly and doing.
Yeah, I think that made it a bit more comfortable for me that I just worked on my own and with you and with, you know, friends and for such a long time, and then eventually people came knocking.
Yeah.
People I still work with 10 years later. So it's like I think it's really important to even like, I mean, now everyone works with industry almost, or you're your own industry, because it's much more. It's a different world than 10 years ago, I think. Even you sort of have to be more industry smart than at least it used to be more possible to be in a sort of an alternative place. But yeah, I had to sort of realize a few things when I met people who wanted to work with me, and they were actually really nice and had excellent views on all the aspects of their work and my work. I mean, I work with a booking agent in Europe that is extremely sort of aware of political situations, of promoters' situations, of festivals, of grants, of like all the different things that are like everyone's compromised. So, and that's really, for me, that's like it's incredible to learn from the people I work with and see like how there are systems and they are very rigid and there are ways of doing things. But yeah, there are huge compromises everywhere and for everyone, which means that sometimes things are, it's hard to sort of feel like you can be, or you can have your very, very own way of doing things. So yeah, I mean, it's a learning experience. But it's very interesting to start meeting people and seeing what that can do for your work.
Any other question?
Yes. What kind of question would you like to be asked about your music?
I'm looking at you now. We should think about Lost Girls as well. What kind of question would we like to be asked? I mean, I'm pretty happy. You asked a few good questions.
That's a good question.
It's a good question. That's why it's hard to answer. Good questions are always hard to answer.
I mean, it's also something like journalists tend not to do, because you all have to translate it to language, and I mean, the music is there to listen for everyone. And I make the experience as artists are disappointed that I don't ask that much about the music. But I mean, yeah, I also made the experience that it's hard for the artists to like translate it into language. Right? How is that for you? You like talking about the music, or like trying to conceptualize something you improvise, for example?
We're quite different, aren't we?
Yeah, but I think the most difficult question for me, like, is what kind of music do you play, or what kind of music is this band? Because it's you have a lot of references, you know, and it's much easier for someone else from outside, I think, to put a label or a name on, you know, what kind of music.
questions I would like to get are questions that are so hard that I don't know what to say, but I'll think about them for like 2 years. But I mean, I can't mention any of them because I would need to get them from you.
Does any other one have a question?
I'm still the same, but I can ask something again.
Yeah.
You sure?
And music-wise, what are you two most interested in right now, or what are you thinking about right now, or exploring?
Looking through my music library now. We should both answer, I think. Right?
Yeah. The latest record I listened to was Bob Dylan's latest album. But yeah, I guess we haven't been like really nerding on music so much the last
But
months.
coming back though now.
Oh yeah.
Listening quite a bit at the moment. So for a while, I was interested in. There were a few things I heard about. Maybe like it's a long time ago now. Maybe like 1 or 2 years, and our friend sent me a link to this Swedish artist, Ted Gärdestad, the 70s idol. And I was sort of blown away by this this extremely catchy, extremely hopeful sort of teenage 70s pop. And I got very into, I guess that and many other things made me interested in writing more conventional songs. Conventional in the sense that really exploring what a chorus is, like really going into that, what I talked about before, this elevation, like elevation in music. Almost like devotional forms. So that was very much my interest for a while. But this is a little while back. So right now, I'm at a place right now where I'm trying to figure out what I'm interested in, and I'm not really sure. But I was intrigued when you asked about this performing acoustic stuff, and we were like totally dissing acoustic guitar live, because I've become like a little interested in like doing very sparse acoustic things. It's only in my head, and I'm not sure if it's going to last. It might last until tomorrow or 2 years. But just doing sparse things that it builds very out of very simple elements in a room, somehow interests me, maybe. I'm not sure if that's interesting as an answer. I mean, these things change a lot. Sometimes it's more to do with words, sometimes more to do with sound. I mean, for you, it's also relating a bit to what you're performing with at any time, because you play in this project, and then you play in my band, and then you play with Kim Mead, and then you play with Moonlay.
Yeah, it can change from day to day. My interests, I guess, for everyone. For you as well.
Are there artists you're looking forward to see at the festival? Because you might gonna see some shows today and maybe tomorrow also.
Yeah, we're gonna see tonight. Bendik is Kent List. We know him before.
Well, actually, I mean, I've had this cold, so I'm not sure if I can see anything. But,
yeah, it's not always easy to see things like the same day as you play. It takes a lot of focus.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the the private life, I'm really boring. So I'm the type of artist that will travel to a festival and end up seeing nothing. Because I'm very tired, not very good at traveling, so I'm just constantly catching up with survival. But right now I could be quite comfortable, but I've had this cold and I've already played 2 shows with absolutely no voice, and it's really, really annoying. So we'll see. But Bendik is he builds things really lovely and nicely, and the way he's working, I'm not to reveal anything, but we spoke with him before and it sounded really interesting, the way that they work together. That's very appealing to me right now.
Cool. So we are looking forward to his show, but also to yours tomorrow night. Thanks so much for being here and opening up. Thank you all for coming, and see you at the festival.